Again, I am here to discuss another important concept from the chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants, that is outbreeding devices. Students, till now we completed the pollination by wind, pollination by water, and then pollination by animals, and along with pollen rewards in the last class only. And now we'll discuss about the outbreeding devices. Students, please remember, so many times asked this question about outbreeding devices. Very important for your examination point of view. That is outbreeding devices. Okay, here these are the outbreeding devices. And usually in outbreeding devices there are four outbreeding devices are there, not types, four outbreeding devices are there. First we should know about the outbreeding device. For what purpose outbreeding device? For what purpose outbreeding devices? Plants usually produce hermaphrodite flowers. Hermaphrodite flowers. It means both the reproductive organs are present in the same flower. Stigma is also in the same flower, and then anther is also in the same flower. So what will happen? The exchange of pollen grains occurs between the same flower. Okay, in the same flower only the pollen grains are going to be transferred to the stigma. That condition we call it as a self pollination. That condition we call it as a self pollination. And continuously if there is a self pollination, occurs, so there is a no change in the genes. Because the pollen grains are coming from the same flower of the same plant. So there is no change in the genes. Also there is no variation in the plants. There is no variation in the flowers. But animals as well as plants, they require they require changes. They require changes or variations. So that condition is not possible in case of self pollination. If the self pollination occurs continuously, what will happen? Inbreeding depressions are going to be happen here. Inbreeding depressions, they are going to be happen here. If the inbreeding depressions occurs, what is meant by inbreeding depression? The plant or the flower is unable to produce uh, good product, or they are unable to produce the good seeds. That product is not that much good. Okay, and either there is a less production of the yield. Okay, there is a less production of the yield that occurs in case of self pollination. So plants are going to be avoid self pollination, continuous self pollination, they are going to be avoid. For that they have developed some techniques or some devices. Those devices we call it as a outbreeding devices. Outbreeding devices. What the plants are going to do? They will not give the preference to the self pollination. They will not give the preference to the self pollination. They will give the preference for the cross pollination. They obviously give the preference for the cross pollination, because just to overcome from the inbreeding depression. The plants will have some outbreeding devices. Okay, and this important one we'll study right now. And here the students, four important outbreeding devices are there. One is receptivity. One is receptivity or synchronization. Or either you can take the synchronization, or either you can take the receptivity. This is the first one. Second one here, the position of the flower or position of the reproductive organs. We can take the position of the reproductive organs. You can take. Then Next one, self incompatibility. Self incompatibility, this is also very important. Self incompatibility, one by one we will study later. And the last one, that is the production of unisexual flowers. Production of unisexual flowers. Students, please remember these are the four outbreeding devices. Please remember, just remember the names. One is receptivity of the flower or the stigma, then position of the flower, important, self incompatibility, then unisexual flowers, production of the unisexual flowers. Because for 3 marks they will ask the question, write the outbreeding devices in plants. Okay, for that purpose you have to write these four you have to write. These are the outbreeding devices. Okay, let us, we'll study one by one. The first thing here, that is receptivity or synchronization. You can take both, receptivity or either synchronization. Here in this condition what will happen, the development of the stigma or the receptivity of the stigma and the production of the pollen grain or release of the pollen grain, the time is going to be vary here. The time or the period is going to be vary here. Here what happens, if you take the stigma, the receptivity of the stigma is early as compared to the release of the pollen grains. It means the maturity of the female reproductive system is early. Female reproductive part is early and male is too late. Or either what will happen here, the production of the pollen grains, or release of the pollen grains is early and the receptivity of the stigma is become late. The receptivity of the stigma is quite late. Okay, and it means maturity time is going to be vary here. Okay, synchronization, what we call it as synchronization, that synchrony that will not occur between the pollen grain, anther and the stigma. Okay, anther and the stigma, I think so. All of you clear with this concept? Okay, listen, once I will explain. Here the receptivity, for example, here this is the female reproductive part and these are the male reproductive part. We can see here. Okay, we can see here the male reproductive part. Here the anthers are going to be, sorry, stigma, pollen grains are going to be released here. This is the stigma should receive that pollen grain and they have some particular time. In some plants what happens, they simultaneously they will develop. Okay, the maturity of the stigma and the maturity of the anther takes place simultaneously. Okay, at a time they are going to be take, and when the pollen grains are going to be released, the stigma will receive that. Okay, the stigma will receive that. But here what are the given receptivity, this stigma can develop early as before the anthers are matured. Before the maturity of the anthers, the stigma is going to be receptive, or the stigma receptivity is too late, but before that the pollen grains are going to be developed or the anthers are going to be developed here. Okay, and that synchrony means the production and receptivity and the release of the pollen grain, both are not going to be match. Okay, that synchrony is not present here. Time duration is different here, time variation can occur here, so they can avoid the inbreeding depression, they can avoid self pollination. If the stigma is not ready to accept the pollen grains, how can pollination can occur, how the pollination is going to be occur here? Or the stigma is ready to receive the pollen grains but the anthers are unable to produce the pollen grains, how the pollination occurs here? Like this, plants are going to be avoid the self pollination. That is first one, that is receptivity and synchronization. This is the first one. And coming to the second one, the position of the flower or position of the reproductive organs. The position can vary here. For example, this is the female reproductive part, that is gynoecium, and this is the male reproductive part, that is androecium. Androecium. This is the androecium, we can see here. This is gynoecium and this is androecium. And here what happens, what they given the point, that is position of the flower or position of the reproductive organs we can take here. You can see here the stigma is somewhat elongated here and anthers are very short. The androeciums are very short here. So the pollen grains, or with the help of wind pollination, the pollen grains are unable to transfer from anther to the stigma. It is not possible because the length of the stigma is somewhat large. So it is not possible to transfer the pollen grains here. If the wind can occur here, but the wind will not transfer that pollen grains towards the stigma. Here the position is somewhat varying here. Position is very here. If they are nearer to each other, the stigma is also near, and then pollen anther is also near, means easily the wind can transfer the pollen grains. Okay, the wind can transfer the pollen grains. But what happening here? The position itself, the position of the anther and the position of the stigma, both are different here. Stigma is elongated and the anthers are short here, or the androeciums are short here, gynoecium is larger here. So because of this position, pollination is not possible here. Self pollination is not possible here. Okay, and in case of this first one, receptivity and synchronization, here also self pollination is not possible. These two will avoid the autogamy. Okay, these two will can prevent the autogamy. Okay, and the third one we can see here. Third one, self incompatibility. Self incompatibility. Students, please remember, this is very important. This is very important. Self incompatibility. I will show here how it is. Self incompatibility. First one, receptivity, second, position of the flower, and third here, self incompatibility. It is a genetic process. It is the genetic method. It is the genetic method. Self incompatibility is a genetic method. How? What happens in case of self incompatibility? If the pollen grains are from the same flower, or if the pollen grains are from the same flower of the different flower of the same plant, if the pollen grains are from the same flower, or if the pollen grains are from the different flower of the same plant, different flower of the same plant. Okay, here the not from the same plant also there is no variation because the plant is same, the genes are also same here. Okay, self incompatibility here, genetic, it is a method, genetic process. Here what happens, if the pollen grains from the same flower or from the same different flower of the same plant, the stigma will not accept the pollen grains, will not accept the pollen grains. It means the pollen grains are unable to germinate. They will not accept it, unable to germinate. In normal process, what happens? The pollen grains, they have to transfer from anther to the stigma, and then they start germination, and the pollen tube is going to be grow, and they reaches to the ovary. But here it is not possible. They will prevent the germination of the pollen grains, or they will prevent the growth of the pollen tube. For example, if they prevented the pollen if the pollen grains are able to germinate, but they will provide the pollen tube growth, or either they will prevent the germination only, pollen germination. They can prevent the pollen germination. Here, if you take the female reproductive part here, okay, this is the anther. These are the pollen grains. When they sat on the, when they are going to be settled on the stigma, at that time germination and pollen tube growth should occur here, but it is mainly prevented here with the help of self incompatibility. Some chemicals, they are going to be uh, they are going to be inactive. They are going to be uh, inactive the pollen grains, or they stop the germination of the pollen grains. So what will happen, it can avoid the self pollination. It means they can avoid the inbreeding depressions. This is very important and very simple. Okay, it's a genetic method in which the pollen grain germination is going to be inhibit. Okay, the stigma can inhibit the pollen germination or pollen tube growth with the help of some chemicals. Okay, this is a genetic method, and it can prevent both autogamy and zytogamy. Autogamy and zytogamy. Autogamy means the pollination between two uh, pollination between the anther and stigma of the same flower. Okay, and also zytogamy, it can also prevent the zytogamy. Zytogamy means pollination occurs between the different flowers of the same plant. Okay, it is possible. This is the self incompatibility. Okay, and the next one, that is unisexual, that is production of the unisexual flowers. This is also very important. Production of the unisexual flowers. Okay, wait. Production of the unisexual flowers. And here plants will produce the unisexual flowers in some cases, not in all cases. In some cases plants will produce the unisexual flowers. Unisexual means they should contain only one sexual, only one sex organ. That is either it is an androecium or either it is a gynoecium. Okay, not both. Either it is an androecium or either it is a gynoecium. But majority of the plants, they are going to be produce uh, hermaphroditic flowers. Okay, that is dioecious flowers. They are going to be, so not dioecious, monoecious flowers they are going to be produced. Okay, and if they are producing the unisexual flowers, if they are producing the unisexual flowers, it means the male plant is different. The male plant is different here, and the female plant is different here. Complete plant is different here. This is the male one and this is the female one. Male plant is different and the female plant is different, then there is no problem at all, because both the plants are different. They can, the cross pollination can occur here. Cross pollination can easily occur here because male plant is different and the female plant is different. Obviously genes are going to be vary here, so the pollination can easily occur here. And in case of castor, and you can say in case of castor and maize, castor and maize, you can see these are monoecious. These are monoecious. It means male and female flowers are different here. In the same plant, male flowers and female flowers are different here. They can prevent the autogamy but not the zytogamy. Okay, they can prevent the autogamy but not the zytogamy. Not the zytogamy, because flowers are from the same plant. Flowers are from the same plant. But in case of unisexual plants or dioecious plants, we can take the example papaya. Papaya is the best example for dioecious plant. Papaya is the best example for dioecious plants. So in case of dioecious plant, what happens? Male and female plants are different here. Okay, example they given papaya. Both the plants are different here. Male plant is different and the female plant is different. So there is a change in the genes. So the cross pollination can occur here. Cross pollination can occur, and this is the one of the best method to avoid the self sorry to avoid the inbreeding depression. Okay, inbreeding depression, these are the things. These are the four important outbreeding devices. Okay, students, these are the four important outbreeding devices. Please remember the first one. You can write synchronization, or you can write receptivity, or you can write both. Both are correct. The position of the flower you can write, or you can write the position of the reproductive organs. Then self incompatibility important. Please remember, whenever they ask the question outbreeding devices, you have to mention the self incompatibility. Then unisexual flower, the production of unisexual flowers. Four are there, and all the four they are very simple. And read your NCERT textbook, they given very clearly, but they are not mentioned separately. Just note these all points. Okay, whatever the points I wrote here, I given here, just go through these, just note down these points and please remember in a easy way. Okay, this is about the outputting devices. Okay, students, I think so you understood all this concept about the outbreeding devices. uh, and here you can see the points what I given in the slide. These are the points whatever I was explained till now. All points are here. You can go through all these. Okay, you can remember or you can refer all these points. I think so more than these only I was explained. Huh? Just go through these points, and along with that go through NCERT textbook, and it is very easy to understand the concept. And I hope all of you understood the outbreeding devices. And in the next video lecture, we'll begin with another important concept, that is pollen pistil interaction. Okay, pollen pistil interaction, that we'll study in the next lecture. Okay, thank you, students.